This is Gareth Southgate, and this is the Three Lions podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Three Lions podcast. My name is Russell Osborne and this is an independent England football supporters podcast. Thanks as always for tuning in. Apologies on the last episode where I wasn't able to update the squad news. I had a nice long weekend down in Cornwall shortly after the squad was announced. However, as you probably know, Millie Bright pulled out of the squad a few days after it was announced and was replaced by Lottie Wubben-Moy. Then goalkeeper Sandy McKeever withdrew of an injury the day before the Brazil game. Already with three goalkeepers, no one was drafted in. Coming up on this episode, I'll be chatting with Dom Smith from englandfootball.org and also of the Evening Standard about the two games we have just had against Brazil and Australia. But first, there were a couple of announcements made before the games were played, I thought I'd just like to touch on. April the 3rd, an unexpected shirt drop was revealed. I say unexpected. Shirts just come out here, there and everywhere now, don't they? So it shouldn't really be unexpected. But the Lionesses had new home and away kits to be worn in the run-up to and during the World Cup. Since 2019, the women have been wearing their own individual shirts, different to the men's, and this is the third set released by Nike. Now, you may remember they began with a white shirt with deep red trim on the sleeve cuffs and an away shirt that was a similar deep red but had a rose-like pattern across it, which I still think to this day is one of the best England away shirts, regardless of gender. That duo of shirts lasted them through COVID until June 2022 when they released the shirt as worn during the Winning Euros campaign. That was the all-white kit with they call it iridescent, don't they? That sort of sparkly effect. Well, that was on the crest. And then they had the away shirt, that all bright crimson affair. Was it orange? It was one I have to say I wasn't a fan of. But now, these new shirts coming out, it means that last pairing will have been in use for less than a year. Okay, they got 18 outings in that time. But for a shirt or kit to have a shelf life of less than a year, when they cost the best part of £75 to £80, is, in my opinion, it's pretty irresponsible. Not that I can do a great deal about it, but I don't think that's good. However, the latest shirts, once again, they are Nike. The home one is an off-white, said to resemble the chalky exterior of the old Wembley Twin Towers, which, considering whilst under the FA's stewardship the women never played there, they only played 4 matches under the WFA, of which a couple of them were just exhibition matches. Seems a bit of a cheap shot to me. Anyway, the shirt, it's got these navy blue sleeve cuffs and triangular panels by the collar, which just remind me of the shirts that Nike done from early 2002. Take a look at the Brazil shirt that they wore during that year's World Cup, the Men's World Cup. Manchester United had something very similar on a home shirt. I think their triangular panels were black. It would appear that someone in the design department has run out of ideas and has reverted to watching old matches to find inspiration. Now, something that the Lionesses should be commended for, amongst many things, I should add, is the addition of blue shorts. Many players, including Beth Mead, have expressed concern about wearing white whilst on their period. And to their credit, Nike have taken this sensibly and the home shorts are now navy blue, or gym blue, to give them their correct colour palettes. Quite like England in white shirts and blue shorts. Reminds me of the 1990 days. Now, the away shirt I have a lot of time for. It's not quite as good as that deep red one from a few years back that I mentioned, but it is certainly up there. Shades of the early 90s men's shirt. It's a light blue with a geometric pattern across it. Well, let's hope that one of these shirts is worn come the World Cup final, and Leah Williamson is seen lifting the trophy in it. Let's hope.
After a very complicated process and 3 rounds of voting, which shows about the democratic process we had, the host of the Euro, Women's Euro 2025 is Switzerland.
Now that is Alexander Ceferin, president of UEFA, announcing on the 4th of April that Switzerland would be the hosts of the 2025 Women's European Championships. They came ahead of a joint Scandinavian bid between Denmark, Finland, Norway and Sweden. Third place was Poland and France, who came last. Now it's the first time that the Swiss will have hosted the competition. Now they plan on using 8 stadiums across the country. Now it's worth noting that none of these are bigger than Basel's 38,000 capacity stadium, and there are 4 below 20,000. So it will be maybe a slightly different feeling to the championships that we had here in England last year, what with Old Trafford hosting a game, Wembley hosting a game. We shall see. But I'd like to think that by the time it comes around, the FA will have some sort of ticketing system in place for those that want to go, because I'd imagine demand could well be high. The Women's Euros, much like the men's, is on a 4-year cycle. Obviously, with the last one held here in 2022, was held back a year due to the pandemic. God, the knock-on effect of that period is still with us, isn't it? It's twice I've mentioned it now. Sorry. And moving from the Euros, just quickly to the World Cup, we are now less than 100 days away now. And apparently ticket sales for the New Zealand and Australia tournament appear to have been doing really well. 650,000 already sold. FIFA are aiming for 1.5 million. 1.5 million tickets sold, to be sold for the finals. Why not? Aim high. We shall see if it happens. As you may remember, in the preview episode, I did run through our World Cup group fixtures, those against Haiti, Denmark and China. And like ourselves, these teams have also been in international action. And just to keep you up to date, our first opponents are Haiti. Well, they lost 2-1 to Nigeria, then beat Moldova 3-1. Denmark, they had a good international window. They beat near neighbours Sweden 1-0, then played Japan. Again, another 1-0 win for them. And China, they had a goalless draw with Switzerland before losing to Spain by 3-0. So the day of the Australia game was 729 days since the Lionesses were last defeated. And the game was Serena Weigmann's 31st in charge. But here to have a chat about those two games with me is, of course, Dom Smith. Hello, Dom.
Hello there. How are we doing?
Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Not too bad.
Well, the Lionesses have had 2 games. Most recently, of course, the Australia game. But we'll start just by taking a look over the Brazil game, which was I was calling it the finalissima. Clearly, I got my pronunciation wrong. It's the finalissima. I think it's got that more European or South American accent to it. But it seems quite some time ago now, that game against Brazil. And you were there too, in a working capacity.
Yeah, although I only just arrived before kickoff, I was being driven down from Manchester because I'd been at Old Trafford the night before to cover Man United, and I left it a bit late, to be honest. So I sort of waltzed in, and they were minutes away from doing the opening ceremony. But there we are.
I want to pick one part of that. You were being driven down. I've got these visions of course, you work for the Evening Standard. The Evening Standard driving you everywhere now, but maybe we can save that for another day.
That's certainly not what actually happened. I was in the back of my mate's car, and it's one of he won't mind me saying this. It's one of the roughest cars you could ever see, to be honest.
That is exactly the sort of vision I now want, and it's the sort of life that I live in, a battered old car. That's the sort of thing I have.
Absolutely right.
Excellent. Well, so you got in there just on time. The one thing I want to say, I had possibly one of the best views or seats I've ever had at the new Wembley. I mean, we all call it the new Wembley now, don't we? It's still Wembley. I was back row above the TV screens. So there's 24 rows of seats behind those TV screens, and I was right on the back row. And I've never seen such a good vantage point of Wembley. You could see the whole pattern of play.
So were you on the halfway line on the other side of the pitch to the dugouts then? No.
I was behind the goal.
Oh, behind the goal. Oh, that's a great view, that.
Yeah, fantastic view. I was very fortunate in that all the goals and the penalties were taken at my end of the ground. But if I can recommend, if you ever get a chance to pick a seat in Wembley for a view of the whole ground, so you can oversee the whole pattern of play, row 24 behind the goal, behind the screens, you get it there. Atmosphere might not sort of reach you, but yeah.
No, I can vouch for that. I was almost exactly where you're on about. In for one of England's first games under Gareth Southgate.
Yep.
We won a qualifier against Slovakia 2-1. Went 1-0 down after 3 minutes. I think Rashford scored the winner. Oh, right. And I was where you're saying, and yeah, a brilliant view. You know, just as good as those expensive seats in the halfway line where you can see it all side to side.
Yeah, without a doubt. But anyway, the women, the finalissima. You may remember I spoke with Rich Laverty on the preview to this these games, and I said that both Brazil and Australia were knockout opponents, standard of knockout opponents for the World Cup after we'd played our group match games, being the equivalent of whoever we played in the Arnold Clark Cup. Was Italy, Korea, and Belgium, wasn't it? And I don't often like to blow my own trumpet, but I think I kind of got that right, that they were of a high, I mean, obviously they were a higher standard, but maybe a little higher standard than we anticipated.
And indeed, maybe a little harder than you'd have wanted if you were a Lioness fan. But if you were a Lioness or Serena Wiegmann, they just exude the utmost professionalism, don't they? And I think that playing against teams that have a genuinely good opportunity or a decent likelihood of actually beating you or holding you to a draw, it can only be a good thing ahead of these tournaments. There's always that thing to tread, isn't there, ahead of a tournament, which is, do you want to go in with a nice, easy enough fixture that you can win, but that it's not a walkover, it's not a San Marino? Well, I mean, I would say England maybe like to do that in the past, men's and women's, but this is a team that have been on a 30-game unbeaten run. So if ever there was a time when they don't need a confidence boost, an ego boost going into a tournament, it was surely now. And to play two teams where you can genuinely learn something feels a lot more valuable than some of these qualifiers that England have racked up 8, 10, 20 goals in recent months. So, yeah, lots of learning to be taken. And actually, if you look at, the blunt fact of the matter is England have had 2 matches. They were favourites to win both, narrow favourites, but favourites to win both, and they won neither. And I think that probably gives both other challengers this summer confidence and England lots of real tangible evidence to go away and look back at the videos and work out how to improve.
Yes, yeah, totally agree. I mean, the first half against Brazil, we saw Lionesses how we sort of know the Lionesses can play. They were sort of composed and they had sort of attacking momentum. We were attacking Brazil to the point where I kind of thought, do you know what? Brazil aren't as good as maybe I'd anticipated they could have been or should have been. Of course, we were one up in the first half. Ella Toone scoring the goal from a Lucy Bronze cross. We had so much possession in that first half that probably we didn't do enough with it to put the game to bed. But the second half was a total turnaround, wasn't it?
It was, and I can remember my my immediate kind of reaction when Ella Toone scored that goal. Of course, it was. You say there, Ella Toone goal assisted by a Lucy Bronze cross, but it deserves a little bit more of a description because, of course, it came from further back, and there was a 1-2 with Stanway that Bronze played, and it was tapped in beautifully by Ella Toone. It was a brilliantly worked goal, and my immediate reaction when it went in was, "Gosh, England are just so good, aren't they?" England. They'd romped to victory in 3 games in the Arnold Clark Cup. They were 1-0 up here against Brazil in a game where you never really felt like what was about to happen was about to happen. At that moment, they looked like they might have added some more. And at that moment, you thought, I certainly thought, gosh, I mean, can anyone stop England? But if you told me then that England weren't going to score for the rest of that international break, I would have been very surprised. But yeah, they just weren't quite as on it going forward in the second half. And I think throughout the international break, through all 4 halves of both 2 games, I think a problem was they were trying to play out from the back, kind of unrelenting in that style of play. But actually, did they really have the players to do it this time? I mean, Alex Greenwood was a huge miss in the Brentford game and Millie Bright a huge miss in both games. And I think it's a compliment to Alex Greenwood, but it's perhaps embarrassing from England's perspective that their best left back is also their third best centre back. So yeah, I think England were missing personnel, but Brazil certainly capitalised, and I think that they were good value for their draw in the end. I think they definitely deserved a draw from that game.
Yeah, just one thing. Yeah, I do totally agree with you, Millie Bright. I think when she pulled out, I thought actually we may struggle here because she just has that presence on the pitch where if they're paired up alongside Leah Williamson, I kind of have Leah Williamson in my mind as this sort of, despite the fact she's captain, she's the quieter one. And there's Millie Bright alongside her who isn't the captain, but is more than capable of ordering players around and sort of making herself heard. And we certainly missed that. And obviously her on-field presence in the style she plays. But yeah, Brazil changed it around their formation for that second half, scored with that last minute injury time equaliser that Mary Earps, it was uncharacteristic fumble. Let's put it that way. But she made up for it in the penalty shootout, which was something that perhaps going into the game, people weren't really aware of. What we actually needed was a high profile, high pressure penalty shootout, having not been involved in one many of those players especially for England, maybe ever.
Yeah, too right. I mean, in a journalistic capacity, when that equaliser went in the 93rd minute, I was devastated because it meant that I had to rewrite everything. But I immediately thought, straight up, after I'd calmed myself down, I thought, well, this is really good for England because you'd always want to go into a tournament with recent enough experience of a penalty shootout, which most teams don't get the luxury of having. But also having it on home soil and having it in front of more fans than England could possibly play in front of this summer. I mean, that's a brilliant set of ingredients to practice a penalty shootout in. And it's a match that, although it's not vital, it does matter. It's not a friendly. It's not like they've stuck a penalty shootout at the end of friendlies. I mean, I'm sick and tired of for the last 20 years of hearing news stories that Sven's England or Fabio's England or Roy's England were going to throw a penalty shootout or a golden goal at the end of a friendly. It never happened, and it would have been a bit farcical, wouldn't it? But at least this was a match that actually there was a reason why it needed to go to penalties, with the answer being we needed to know who was going to win the trophy, and England did. They only Ella Toone looked nervous before, and I don't just say that because she was the only one who missed. She did look nervous, and the others strolled up quite confidently. But Mary Earps obviously reminding everyone quite vibrantly, quite vehemently that she is the goalkeeper that she is after she'd made that save, because she walked away as if to say, "Yeah, I'm here, and you can doubt me if you want, but I'll always come back stronger than you doubt me," which I think is a real positive for her to have experienced that, because she had a few moments in the Euros where she made great saves, and I think people clung to that. They kept mentioning her retreating save against Spain on the goal line and a couple of saves in the final. But really, I think it's fair to say it was slim pickings, highlights for Mary Earps over the Euros. Lots of clean sheets, but were there really a number of world-class saves? Well, to have this moment, especially after making an uncharacteristic error, as you say, it's good for her, and it bodes well for England.
Yeah. Just to, for those that maybe don't know what England women or the Lionesses penalty shootout record has been over the years, it's been pretty poor, so it's good to put it to bed. First one was 1979, where we lost to Sweden. The 1984 European final was lost on a penalty shootout, again to Sweden. 2005, there was a Algarve Cup or equivalent where we lost to China. And then in the 2011 World Cup against France, we lost a penalty shootout there. So to finally win one on the verge of a World Cup coming up is the best thing to have done. But the next game was Australia, and a nation that the night after our game against Brazil, they played Scotland at Kingsmeadow. Kingsmeadow was where obviously Kingstonian used to play, but AFC Wimbledon, I think, played there for a little. I don't think they've got their own ground now, haven't they? So it must just be Chelsea women that play there, I think.
Yeah,
now.
It's just Chelsea women and occasionally the Chelsea academy team.
But anyway, surprisingly, Australia lost to Scotland. I don't think Sam Kerr played in that. Well, I don't think Sam Kerr played in that game. She did, but there was two, one for Australia, one for Scotland, which is a strange scenario to have happened. So they went into it on the back of a defeat. England went into this game on the back of picking up a trophy. But a damp Tuesday evening at Brentford was where it all came to an end, this mighty run that the Lionesses have been on. And this was a game, once again, you were at. Yeah,
very, very windy, very rainy. And I mean, England just didn't look on it from the first whistle. No. It's a cliche in football, that phrase, but it really was true here. Lauren Hemp, I thought, was the best player until she was brought off with an injury. I thought that the wingers weren't as dangerous as they had been, and yet I would say they were the best players. There was obviously an error by Leah Williamson, who headed it, but not powerfully enough, back to Mary Earps, and Sam Kerr stole in and like the striker that she is, nicked in and dinked the ball over Earps for the opener. And then the second goal, you have to say that the player who headed it wanted it more. I can't recall her name now. I think it was Grant, Charlotte Grant, wanted it more than Lucy Bronze, and got her just desserts because she got her goal. England really did look like they lacked any ideas, and Leah Williamson said that herself afterwards. And she also said that sometimes you take blessings in disguises, and maybe this was a blessing in disguise, which I think is an interesting way to spin it, but I'm not sure she's a million miles off. I tend to agree that if you haven't tangibly got an example of a defeat before you go into a tournament, maybe you can't, maybe you panic too much when you're in that instance. And England went in at the break losing under Wiegman for the first time. It was the third time they'd been losing under Wiegman in 31 games, but the first time they'd been losing at half time. The first time that they were then 2-0 down, and did they recover? I mean, they came nowhere near recovering, to be completely honest. They looked like they lacked ideas, they lacked invention. Whenever they did shoot, it was either comfortable for the goalkeeper, Mackenzie Arnold, or it was just way over, way wide, blocked well by Australia. I felt like the match could have been 90 hours rather than 90 minutes, and England still wouldn't have scored. So, a real off night for England.
And it happens. I think we all just have to accept it happens. Teams have an off night. Doesn't matter at what level you're playing at. You could be playing local league, Sunday league. You could be on a run of however many games. You could be Championship, Premier League. A team will have an off day. And it was just one of those ones. It didn't happen for us. There were, too many players that just the whole. I think that the vibe from watching it on the telly that there was no urgency. I don't think we underestimated Australia, but it just seemed like everyone was playing on a level 5 as opposed to a level 8, 9, 10 that we're so used to them playing at. But as Leah Williams said, a blessing in disguise. I totally agree. We need this type of game, that the pressures that some teams will bring to us in a knockout game of a World Cup, and let's see now how we react to it, how the team, how Sarina Weigman and her team sort of analyse the game going forwards, and maybe the players, maybe she'll have a rethink maybe of some of the players in the positions that they play, or bringing in some new ones. Waits to be seen. I was, as you say, Lauren Hemp, I thought she had a good couple of games, but was unfortunate that she was subbed off. Lauren James replaced her, and obviously we all know what Lauren James is capable of, but again, just didn't really seem on it against Australia. Leah Williamson, obviously the header, it's again one of those things, and the deflection for the second goal again is just one of those things. But I think she just had a poor international window in comparison to what she's capable of. I think would be fair. I'm not overly panicking about the result. The performance maybe is what we need to look at, but going forward to the World Cup, I think it's good to get this out of our system now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'd hope that it wouldn't repeat itself, but you never do know. I think this England team are certainly favourites for the World Cup and good enough to win it. I wonder whether they maybe might just end up in a tough match in a quarter-final or a semi-final or maybe a final and not quite get the big moments of the game right. So much of tournament football is about that. If England were playing in a league season, I think they'd probably win the league, whoever they were playing against.
Yeah.
But if they're playing in knockout football, you need to get the moments right. And I wonder whether perhaps they won't this time, whereas they did in matches against Spain and Germany at the European Championships, and even Sweden, who I think had the first shot of the game in that semi-final in Sheffield in something like the first minute. It was a cracking save from Mary Earps. And then they ended up winning 4-0. Well, if you concede that goal, you're suddenly losing 1-0 in the semi-final and you might not make Wembley. So those are the sorts of big moments that have gone for them in the past. Maybe they won't go for them this summer. But look, I mean, I haven't got a crystal ball in front of me. We hope dearly that they will, and that or that England won't blow everyone out of the water and don't need things to go their way because they're just too good. But the history of tournaments suggests you're at least going to come across one or two games that are a lot tighter than you'd like them to be in tournament, because no one has everything their own way, do they?
No.
And England certainly favourites, but whether they actually will win it, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I'm not going to put any money down on it just yet. I think we've got a couple more friendlies still to come. There was actually an interesting tweet I saw. It might have been Jackie Oatley, I think, who put it out there, that England don't have the impact subs to bring on to maybe change a game at this moment, as in like Alessia Russo did last year for the Euros. because you'd be thinking soon that maybe Lauren James will be an immediate starter, and maybe we don't have the depth to bring on for impact as we did. Would you agree?
I would agree. I think it seems clear to me that Rachel Daly will go from being England's first choice left back to their second choice striker, and probably coming on after 60 minutes for Russo in the game. So there's one, Daly. She's an excellent player. I think your second would be whoever doesn't start out wide, out of Lauren Hemp, Chloe Kelly, and Lauren James. There's your second. But yeah, you're right. It is much slimmer pickings in those areas than it was at the European Championships, and England will be fretting on the fitness of Fran Kirby, so that there's another option in attacking midfield instead of Ella Toone. So I agree. England need to. I'm not sure how that can change. Actually, we know that with international football, you're constrained by the constraints in front of you. But if England can find some substitutes from somewhere, or indeed some players can step up who you might not have expected to, then yeah, we know the importance of squads at major tournaments.
Yeah. Well, the Lionesses last lost to Canada. That was back on the 13th of April, 2021. They went on an amazing 30-game unbeaten streak until it all came to an end against Australia. The next international window for the women takes place, I believe, between the 10th and the 18th of July, by which time Serena will have announced her squad. The World Cup, of course, starts on the 20th of July. As yet, there have been no warm-up fixtures announced. But as Rich Laverty suggested when I spoke with him last, chances are they'll play one here over in England, and then possibly a one or two in Australia as it comes around.
That's looking likely indeed, yeah.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see who they pick. I'd imagine the standard may not be as high as Brazil and Australia, with the greatest respect to whoever it might be. But it's all going to come to a head very soon.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to it. Of course, we'll be talking about the World Cup taking place in Australia and New Zealand as it approaches us, and I'd like to think maybe we can tap you up on it nearer the time, Dom.
I will look very much forward to it.
Always a pleasure. Keep doing all the good work on englandfootball.org and the Evening Standard. And yeah, we'll speak with you soon.
Look forward to it. Thanks very much for having me again.
Thank you as always to Dom there. You can follow him on social media. He's on Twitter at Mr. Dom Smith. You'll find all his Evening Standard write-ups there too. I'll be back with you very soon, probably just a few days' time, as I'll be taking a look at the recent announcement of England, the UK and Ireland's bid for the 2028 European Men's Championships. I hope you can join me for that one very soon. Also, whilst we are talking senior men, if you've not seen it yet, Malta away applications are now open. If you intend on going there for the game, make sure you get that application in. So as always, stay subscribed. You won't miss any of those episodes. So until then, take care of yourselves. Cheers.